Let's see Six's thoughts on how strong are the Sannin. I'm very interested. Alright. Let us commence, folks. Here we go. It's a little lag.
The Sannin have an
If you guys can hear it, let me know. I can turn it up, turn it down, just let me know.
Not only in terms of power, but politically as well. Their name carries a great deal of weight throughout the Five Nations, so much so that Orochimaru's attack on Konoha had spooked the Raikage into wanting to learn new jutsu, likely due to fear for his own life. Today I'll be going over how strong they are, as well as some of their abilities. For this, I'll be primarily sticking to the manga and data books, but I'll also include a few things from the anime for those of you that want to use it. First, I'd like to address a lot of incorrect things people in this community tend to say when trying to scale the Sannin. I've touched on some of this before in other videos, but I just want to reiterate these things again so you guys can better understand where I think the Sannin scale compared to other Naruto characters. Okay, so first off, none of the Sannin scale to Pain. Pain is one of those characters like Minato and Itachi that have been portrayed as a higher level than the Sannin. In the weekly release of the manga says,
wait, what did he say about Itachi? Let me hear that again.
Stating despair when facing those characters like Minato and Itachi that have been portrayed as a higher level than the Sannin. In the weekly release of the manga says this virtually word for word, stating that even someone of Sage Jiraiya's caliber is made to feel shock, amazement, and despair when facing Pain, with Jiraiya even admitting Pain will kill him at the rate the fight was going, after all his strongest attacks failed to do anything against Pain. The manga also says Pain is invincible and violent compared to Tsunade, and he calls her power meaningless. Also, if you look at the video game, Pain violates and bisects Orochimaru with Almighty Push when recruiting him to join the Akatsuki.
Let's be honest, that's probably what would have happened if we would have seen that in the manga or the anime. Let's be honest. He's just superior, clearly. Pain is superior.
So it's fair to say the narrative within the series, that being the manga, and outside the series, that being the video game or anime continuity, consistently portrays the Sannin as being inferior to Pain. You don't see too much of this anymore, but some people also have a problem with Sage Naruto beating Sage Jiraiya and the other Sannin. Even though
I don't understand
verbatim stated several times that I've surpassed him. I really just don't see how people can't grasp this, but the whole narrative building up to the Pain fight is that Naruto is training to surpass Jiraiya.
Yeah, that's my thoughts exactly. That's what I was just thinking.
And defeat an opponent that he couldn't, that being Pain.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Pain killed Jiraiya. So hear me out. Fukusaku says while training Naruto back in chapter 418, having a better sage mode than Jiraiya may mean that Naruto exceeds him as a sage, and the volume summary directly preceding this confirms this in terms of power. And when he later says Naruto has surpassed his predecessors, the data book confirms his sage mode is beyond theirs. So even if you want to say this just means Naruto is a better sage, the manga still indicates this is a reason as to why Naruto is more powerful than Jiraiya. So just to give a quick rundown for those of you who may be new to scaling Naruto or are just more interested in learning more about the series, the three legendary Sannin, aka Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade, are some of the strongest shinobi in Konoha history, and are widely considered to be the strongest shinobi, up there with the Kage according to the data books. The Sannin are always presented as being shinobi that are on the same level in terms of overall combative ability, while all having their own unique powers and fighting styles, with the data book and characters like Ebisu indicating that to take down one of the Sannin, you would need another Sannin's help. But obviously, we can interpret this to mean you would need someone who is Sannin level or stronger, i.e. Pain, Itachi,
it's all about the semantics.
Sasuke, Sage Naruto. This is also supported by their team's nickname, the Three Deadlock, which is a metaphor used to symbolize how their different fighting styles, strengths, and weaknesses, they are all a match for one another. At least in base, this is going to be supported by some stuff we'll go over later. So I'll start things off here by going over Orochimaru as he appeared during part 1 when he launched Konoha Crush. Even though Orochimaru is on the same level as Jiraiya and Tsunade, he is implied heavily by the manga and some anime material to be the strongest out of the Sannin in base. Hiruzen implies he thinks this during the fight with Orochimaru, And Orochimaru implies whenever he and Jiraiya fought that he always won. However, due to other statements surrounding the Sannin, we know even if you want to say Orochimaru is superior to the other Sannin that he would beat them in a fight, they are all still on the same level in terms of combat. Orochimaru is just at the tippity top of this level. The easiest way to scale this form of Orochimaru is by using his fight with old Hiruzen. The manga, data books, fan books, and anime
currently
all
react to
portray
6's
Hiruzen
video.
versus Orochimaru as an incredibly close fight, with both of them stated to be equals numerous times. A lot of people will immediately ask,
wait, wasn't Hiruzen holding back / mentally nerfed?
And while that's
I want to
true,
hear this.
the
Let's see what he
second
says.
data book states that Orochimaru was playing around with Hiruzen and viewed the fight as a boring pastime, and is stated to be stronger than Hiruzen to some degree numerous times outside of this encounter. Hiruzen also only actually begins to compete with Orochimaru after getting super amped by his desire to protect Konoha, so the narrative seems to indicate that they're at least around the same level.
I agree with
but
that.
You can argue Oro
Bare
edges
minimum,
him
they're
out
relative.
via some data book statements. Next, to quickly go over how strong old Hiruzen is, we need to take a look at some of the statements surrounding him back in part 1. Kabuto says Hiruzen has a reputation of being the strongest of the 5 Kage at the time, and while you could say people like A trained and got stronger after this, there are some ways to say this still means Hiruzen and people should be above that Kage level, as Kage level is a meta because we know not all Kage are the same strength.
Fuck. But yeah, basically, not all Kage created equal, so the term Kage level is quite
Even while mentally
ambiguous.
nerfed and arguably fatigued, Hiruzen still goes toe-to-toe with the Edo Hokage and with the Anbu described as a Hokage level battle, with the second data book confirming this. Depending on how you interpret these and a fan book statement that calls the title of the Hokage the top of the ninja world, you could argue being Hokage level puts you above the other Kage, but I'll
Agreed.
admit that's a little too edgy when you look at some of the things that Kages like A do during the time of the war arc. So ultimately, this should mean even while weakened, Hiruzen is still a Kage level combatant, which supports the Sannin being around that level in their base forms. While most of Orochimaru's scaling comes from part 1, he remains a pretty strong villain compared to the others we see in Naruto, even going into early part 2. Numerous characters, including Sasuke himself, say the only reason that Sasuke was able to beat Orochimaru was due to Orochimaru being weakened by the Reaper Death Seal and the illness caused by his body rejecting him. Deidara, one of the most arrogant Akatsuki members, who has a whole beef with Orochimaru. Not kidding, the only reason Deidara even fought Sasuke was because he was pissed he killed Orochimaru before he could. And he even says he can't believe Orochimaru would lose to someone like Heavy Sasuke, who's actually stronger than the Sasuke for Orochimaru.
Yeah, some of them
seeing
definitely are.
Fight. Now, when it comes to Orochimaru's abilities, he's well known for having a pretty wide and diverse arsenal of techniques that range from different kinds of summoning jutsu to poisons, healing, and other powerful ninjutsu. But before we get into those, I want to quickly touch on how powerful his aura and presence is. As I said before, Orochimaru is viewed as one of the most frightening characters in the verse, and one of the reasons for this is his ability to strike fear in people at just a glance. This has been enough to make Jonin level characters like Part 1 Kakashi and Kabuto view fighting Orochimaru as insane and had them frozen
even Kakashi
in place,
feared him.
literally
Part
just
1.
shitting themselves. Orochimaru is able to do this to Kabuto even after being weakened by the loss of his arms. So based on this, we can reach the conclusion that Jonin can't even step to Orochimaru.
Correct.
And with these two particular Jonin, Kabuto and Kakashi, you could even argue that he could do this to opponents of even Kage level. So yeah, Orochimaru is definitely pretty strong off of just his aura alone. Let's get into some of Orochimaru's abilities. Orochimaru's fighting style mainly centered around his talent in ninjutsu, in particular his skill with summoning based techniques. With various forms of summoning jutsu, Orochimaru can summon small snakes from his mouth and sleeves to bind or attack his enemy, or giant sage snakes like Manda, who was beating Gamabunta and Katsuya at the same time, blades like his sword of Kusanagi, and with the Edo Tensei, he can summon and make pawns out of the most powerful shinobi like the first and second Hokage, albeit much weaker than they appeared during the war arc.
Of course.
And if you want to use the anime, he can also summon the third Kazekage with Edo Tensei. He can also summon the Rashomon gates to defend himself and absorb, disperse, and suppress oncoming attacks. And even while arguably weakened and without the soul of his arms, he was still able to summon 3. This is pretty impressive since base Hashirama summons only 2 more than him, but you could also say that this is more of a casual feat for Hashirama. Orochimaru is also incredibly skilled with sealing jutsu, and we see this when he tampers with Minato's seal placed on Naruto, as well as the curse seal he can use to paralyze his targets. Orochimaru is also talented when it comes to elemental jutsu, with the 4th data book listing him as being able to use all 7 basic nature transformations. Sadly, the only one we actually get to see Orochimaru use is Wind Style, which the data book says he can use to
next to no
casually
chakra
make
part 1.
hurricanes,
Notice in the
Earth
war he's basically
Style,
scamming,
which he can
spamming
use to
combo.
make
Yep,
blood clones.
it seems there is
and a
quite
few
an
offensive
evolution for
fire style
Kakashi.
techniques he used against
Power-wise,
Sasuke in the Forest of Death.
stamina-wise,
A
it's
lot of
quite
Orochimaru's
insane.
hacks that make him
Quite
so
insane.
hard to kill stem from the many experiments
Most likely to
he
fit the
had
narrative,
conducted
right?
over
Because
the
if he had that
years in
kind
order
of
to
stamina
enhance
by
his
the
body.
war, he'd be useless
Orochimaru's
against
healing
someone like
factor and
Obito
serpentine
or
anatomy both
just in the
stem
war in
from
general.
what the data
So
book calls
it
the
was kind
power
of
the white
inevitable
snake.
that he would
It
get
is
a boost
implied
in
he
power.
acquired this ability when he went to Ryuchi
Quite
Cave to learn Sage Mode
drastic
and turned
boost,
into
but
a
still,
snake
it
after
was
failing to
necessary
properly
for the
absorb the
narrative.
nature energy when the Great Snake Sage bit him. This is also what allows Orochimaru to survive lethal attacks by reconnecting himself with snakes or shedding his skin, heal from injuries at a rapid rate, and the ability to use his true form, a large serpent made of smaller serpents that can regenerate. Orochimaru's blood also has a toxin that when exposed to the air becomes a powerful paralytic. The 3rd data book says this is also what allows Orochimaru to use his strongest jutsu, the 8 branches technique, which uses the power of the white snake to transform Orochimaru into a giant Kusanagi wielding hydra that can regrow its heads. This form of Orochimaru is stated to be bigger than even Manda and surpass Orochimaru himself. Outside of that, you could use Pain's statement to say he might be on par with Sage Jiraiya and pre-war 100 healing Tsunade, but that's about all since he doesn't really do anything in this form other than get folded by a blind deathbed Itachi. I forgot to mention this earlier, but being stronger than Heavy Sasuke should be enough to put Orochimaru and by extension the other base Sannin above most of the low-level Akatsuki members, since Sasuke is implied by the manga and 3rd data book to be stronger than the grunt-level Akatsuki members we were first introduced to, like Deidara, Kakuzu,
It's a
Hidan,
fair
and
transitive
possibly Konan as well.
connection.
This is kind of supported by the first fan book in the anime profile guides, which imply that Orochimaru was seen as the strongest and most feared villain at the time. While this obviously wouldn't include people stronger than Orochimaru like Obito, Pain, or Itachi, who maybe just aren't
So fat.
God damn it.
You're not fat. It's the shirt.
These fucking ads, man.
Look at Nate. His true.
Alright, there we go.
as
Sorry
well
about that,
known
guys.
as the Sannin at this point in time. It should still support Orochimaru being superior than a lot of other Akatsuki members, and help you guys understand how Orochimaru is viewed in the actual story. Moving on to Jiraiya, since all the base Sannin are around the same level, we can pretty much use Orochimaru and Old Hiruzen as measuring sticks to see how strong Jiraiya and Tsunade are. Like I said earlier, while Orochimaru is strong enough to beat base Jiraiya, they are still on the same level, with the first data book telling us this verbatim. Orochimaru and Jiraiya's dynamic mirrors Naruto and Sasuke's rivalry in part 1, and the second data book puts it this way. Jiraiya basically keeps up with Orochimaru's talent and development of forbidden ninjutsu through what the data book calls Spartan training, brutal combat, and basically the resolve to always preserve. So what we can gather from this is that while Orochimaru may be more talented and have better ninjutsu than Jiraiya, he reaches this level through sheer physical strength, so he'd at least be a match for him physically, like how Naruto would combat Sasuke's strength in part 1.
Right.
While you can probably say Tsunade is physically superior to Orochimaru and Jiraiya due to some stuff I'll touch on later, you can argue Jiraiya could still beat her with his ninjutsu or hacks, since he still thinks he can kill her even after acknowledging her physical strength. Base Jiraiya being
good
on
point.
par with the other Sannin and Old Hiruzen would also place him in this high Kage tier. Some more important stuff to support this would be Jiraiya's desire to fight / spar with Old Hiruzen, which you could say means Jiraiya thinks he's an opponent he can face, as well as Naruto 1 Decade 100 Ninja Anniversary Guide for the manga, which says with the ninjutsu Jiraiya learned at Mount Miyaboku, he has surpassed the techniques of the other villages since the Shinobi Wars. This would mean, at least at the point in the series, Jiraiya's numerous toad-based jutsu were superior to the magnet style of Kazekage's maze lava and vapor style, Raikage's lightning cloak, and even Inoki's particle style. And while that may sound a little crazy, like I said before, some characters like A go on to become stronger And when we go over some abilities of Jiraiya's, this will start to make more sense. Jiraiya, like Orochimaru, has a wide variety of useful techniques in his arsenal that range from toad summons and elemental jutsu to the Rasengan and different types of sealing jutsu. A lot of Jiraiya's abilities revolve around his skill with the summoning jutsu, like Orochimaru and his snakes. Jiraiya's contact with the toads at Mount Miyaboku that allow him to summon numerous toads who can assist him in combat, like Gamakin or his main summon Gamabunta, who is stated to be the strongest of the giant toads and is powerful enough to fight not only a fully transformed Gaara, but
earlier
Manda as
on
well,
Minato, you
alongside Katsuki.
had another father
Jiraiya's
figure
skill
besides
with the
Ruka.
summoning jutsu goes even further.
Yeah, I think
than
Kakashi,
this.
after the
He
death
can
of
also
all
summon
his,
the belly
what he
of the
thought
giant
were his
fire-breathing
comrades,
toad to
right?
trap and consume
He
enemies.
kind of
Jiraiya
just
is
started
also shown to
going
be
with the
skilled in
flow until he
elemental
met Team
jutsu,
7,
specifically
the original
fire
Team
style
7.
and earth
Well,
style.
the next
Jiraiya's
Team
been
7, I should
shown
say.
to use many
That's when he
offensive
started to have more
fire-style
resolve,
attacks like his flame bombs,
and he started to take things more serious again. That's when he really started to
style to create swamps big enough to sink enemies
take the
like
world seriously. I
Orochimaru's
just think he had a
giant
moment in
snakes.
time
Jiraiya
where he was
is
just going
also
with the
one of
flow.
few people to have mastered the Rasengan,
Kind
which
of
the
had
data
like
book
that
says is among the
nihilistic
highest
take
grade
on the
of
world
power
to some
among
extent.
ninjutsu
Still a shinobi,
that
but
do not
at the same
require
time he was
hand
just
shields. In the anniversary guide that
low in
actually
resolve
shows
until he
an
met
image
Naruto and Sasuke
depicting
Sakura.
Jiraiya using a flaming Rasengan, like how he does in some of the video games. You can definitely make an argument for him being able to use
Jiraiya
a
says
fire-style
Tsunade nearly killed him
Rasengan.
earlier, and she just
Orochimaru
beats down
also implies
Orochimaru the
that
entire
Jiraiya's
fight.
skill in sealing
Well, to be
jutsu is
fair,
on par with
that wasn't
of
a
himself
legitimate
and Risen,
encounter between
and we
Jiraiya
even
and
see as
Tsunade.
much
He was
with
just being
Jiraiya easily
drooling over
undoing
her,
the
and
seal
she
Orochimaru
got
placed on
upset.
Kid Naruto, and being
And
able to lock
her
and
beating out
unlock
Orochimaru, I
the
mean, he
seal
was
Naruto placed on Naruto,
pretty disabled.
as well as developing sealing tags
adding on to that,
capable of
he really
suppressing
didn't take
some
her
of the
serious.
Nine Tails chakra, which Kakashi was able to use to suppress KM3 Naruto, or Three Tails. I also want to quickly touch on Jiraiya's Sage Mode, which when used with Mon Pa dramatically increases the strength of Jiraiya's ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, which is often defined by strength and speed. So this form, like Orochimaru's Hydra and Tsunade's strength of 100 healing seal, takes Jiraiya beyond the level he was previously and give him access to even crazier and stronger abilities than in base. For example, in Sage Mode, Jiraiya can create his Master Rasengan big enough to easily carve away a mountain according to the third data book, and can use fire style 10 times larger than what he uses in base due to toad oil that can reach temperatures of up to several thousand degrees Celsius, which would be way hotter than our Earth's sun. Sage Jiraiya also has Ma and Pa for support, who along with assisting in ninjutsu attacks can use the Toad Song, which binds a target's psyche and is what the third data book calls the most powerful genjutsu, which can arguably mean Sage Jiraiya's Toad Song is more powerful than even Tsukuyomi. Another thing I want to note about this genjutsu is that it worked on Pain, who is shown to have numerous genjutsu barriers, and this is probably what made Pain say the secret of how his abilities worked is what enabled the other paths to avoid genjutsu and beat Jiraiya, and he may have lost all 6 paths if they were all out. You can say Pain's statement implies Sage Jiraiya is on par with Orochimaru's Hydra and Tsunade's strength of 100 seal at that point, and if you use the anime where Jiraiya still lost but actually fought all 6 paths of Pain.
Oh God, you'd lose.
Maybe say the statement from Pain Art Kakashi implies he's not as strong as Sage Jiraiya yet. Last but not least, let's go over Tsunade.
Goddamn ads. That's a rare argument for Sage Jiraiya. Toad Song
Credit
is above
Karma helps
Tsukuyomi.
members get approved for a credit card 66% more often with Karma Confidence technology.
Fucking
But
ads,
if you
bro.
purchase
While Tsunade definitely doesn't display the same level of versatility as Orochimaru and Jiraiya in terms of her arsenal, she reaches their level
Did you
of
mean that
combat
the
and
Toad
is still
Song
a
being
match
above
for them in
Tsukuyomi is a
base,
rad argument?
According to multiple sources like the fan book, due to her raw physical strength. We see this pretty frequently during the earlier parts of the manga, with Jiraiya basically admitting inferiority to her in terms of physical combat and implying she's still strong enough to mess him up as bad as she did when she almost killed him. This is also supported by Orochimaru warning Kabuto that she could one-shot them with her kicks, and while Orochimaru was weakened, the databook tells us no one could receive this kick from Tsunade and avoid being pulverized. The anniversary guide also says this kick has enough power to blow away a country if you're looking for a way to visualize how strong this kick from Tsunade is. So in order to understand how strong Tsunade is throughout the series, we need to talk about her Will of Fire that she inherited from the other Hokage and how it relates to her strength. Tsunade, like many other shinobi from Konoha, like Kakashi, and Naruto,
I can see that.
shares her grandfather's philosophy known as the Will of Fire.
I have some thoughts on the data
Tsunade's
books.
willpower acts as a source for Tsunade's strength, and she, as well as the manga, tell us these words verbatim. This is also why her strength fluctuates so much during the series. Back during the Second War, Tsunade was considered to be the strongest ninja alongside Orochimaru and Jiraiya. But after experiencing trauma due to the loss of her lover Dan and younger brother Nawaki, she lost the will to fight and regressed in strength. By the time we see Tsunade in part 1, she's become rusty and is consumed by grief and her gambling habits. This also explains why initially no arms of Orochimaru and Kabuto are able to keep up with her, and the fact that Kabuto boosted his physical energy with a ration pill once Tsunade started to get tired. However, after meeting Naruto and noticing the similarities between him, Dan, and Nawaki, who all dreamed of becoming Hokage, the databook says this reignites the Will of Fire within Tsunade and inspires her to put her life on the line. This revived the once great Sannin, so you could say this is when she overcame her regression and rose back up to Jiraiya and Orochimaru's level. We also see this again during the war arc where against Madara, Tsunade says that her true power lies in the Will of Fire. After Madara's plan to demoralize her backfires, we see she becomes strong enough to tear apart his Susanoo, much to Madara's surprise. However, I do want to note that Tsunade was probably only able to accomplish these feats against Madara due to this mental amp and the fact that he was holding back. So like I said, while Tsunade doesn't have as many abilities as Jiraiya and Orochimaru, she still has some pretty interesting ones we should go over. While Tsunade is mainly known for her straightforward beat-down fighting style, her skills in medical ninjutsu give her access to a lot of useful abilities in combat. With her knowledge of the human body and more specifically the nervous system, Tsunade can use lightning style to rewire the brain signals and nervous system sends to the brain and make the opponent move in different directions. And while Kabuto was able to figure this out as he portrayed as one of the smartest characters in the series, even considered smarter than people like Orochimaru and Tobirama, Tsunade's biggest asset in combat is her Yin Seal. With the Yin Seal, Tsunade can use techniques like Creation Rebirth, which she can use to regrow organs and limbs, the technique 100 Healings, which uses chakra that has been continuously siphoned into the seal for years to give the user an insane amp. With the 100 Healings, Tsunade was stronger than even Lightened A according to Madara and was capable of damaging his Susanoo on multiple occasions. And while she was slower than him, also according to Madara, we see that she can still properly time her attacks in coordination with him and Inoki. However, it is important to note that we see on numerous occasions that Tsunade isn't durable enough to tank the level of the force she outputs. And even with her mental amps, she should cap right below the War Arc Sakura that unlocked the Yin Seal, since the databooks as well as numerous characters in the manga imply Sakura has surpassed Tsunade by this point. Well, this is probably just an indication to the audience from Kishimoto. Hashirama says Sakura may have surpassed Tsunade and she was like 5 when he died, so maybe that was the prime Tsunade was talking about in part 1, who knows. But seriously, all jokes aside, Tsunade at the absolute strongest is slightly weaker than the Sakura that fought alongside KCM1 Naruto and EMS Sasuke. Lastly, like the other Sannin, Tsunade is skilled with the summoning jutsu and has her own boss summon Katsuyu. Katsuyu is considered to be in the same league as Manda and Gamabunta in terms of strength, and this is only 5% of Katsuyu's full body, which is so big that it encompasses the entire Shikotsu forest, and Sakura and Tsunade working together can only summon 1/10 of her body. Katsuyu also has the ability to heal others,
that's insane,
avoid attacks by splitting into smaller slugs, spit acid so corrosive that Orochimaru implies it can kill him, and can even heal Tsunade and others in coordination with the Yin Seal. So as you guys can see, while the Sannin aren't the strongest characters like Pain, Itachi, MS Sasuke, or Sage Naruto, they are still some of the strongest characters in the series, some of the most beloved by the fandom, and they should still scale above Jonin class fighters like pre-war Kakashi, Hebi Sasuke, and most of the Akatsuki. And with their wide range of abilities, you can make a lot of strong arguments for them beating Kage, and I want this video to be a fair analysis, so I don't really need to take it any further than that. As always, if you enjoyed the video, Please go ahead and give it a
Nice
like
video,
and
6.
subscribe.
Nice
and
video.
Other than that, have a nice day.
Peace. All right, let's see the comments real quick. Let's read what they say. I don't think Orochimaru being a Sannin had anything to do with the Red Kage wanting to train. Orochimaru just killed 2 Kage and attacked the strongest of the 5 nations. Preparing for the worst just made sense. I'm glad he started with Pain, considering that he's one of the characters who's fought all 3 Sannin within a similar time period as well. I mean, if you're talking to Sannin, then you have to talk about them as a team. Seeing how Jiraiya did versus Pain with absolutely no prep, it's not unreasonable to say that they would have stood a chance if Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya versus Pain. Not the young Sannin that got beaten by Danzo, who was beaten by Pain. But for sure, they're all grown a lot stronger since the war. I agree. Let's see. The Sannin are definitely not relative after... Oh, look at this guy's name. Look at this guy's fucking name, man. Let's continue what he says, though. They're considered on par all the way past even the era of Sage Jiraiya and Orochimaru and Tsunade. Just have better scaling. What is he saying here? The Sannin are definitely not relative after a certain point. They're considered all on par all the way past... I think he's asking if that's what... For real, I feel like no one agrees that Warwick Tsunade is just barely stronger than Jiraiya. Because they underrated her. They really think Kishimoto showed us how weak the Kage are and not that how strong Madara is. And based on her feats against Madara, she would stop Jiraiya into the ground. Okay, I mean... all she did was crack his Susanoo. That kind of displays her strength, but in no way, shape, or form was he ever in a scenario of danger. He was toying with the Kage. So I don't completely agree with this. She is physically superior as far as brute strength, obviously, to Jiraiya and Orochimaru, clearly. Trying to see if there's any interesting takes here. What do you guys think about that? Tsunade definitely cracked. I agree. Definitely. That kind of power that she outputs is ridiculous. The brute strength that she possesses is impressive, for sure. Yeah, so my take on the Sannin is, hey, let me go back to the images real quick. Let me put this back real quick. So my opinion on the Sannin is this. As far as the narrative being told, I think out of the 3, the 2 that are the most relative are probably, I mean, it's contentious. Probably Jiraiya and Orochimaru, based on during the 3-way deadlock, they were both disabled. Jiraiya was drugged by Tsunade, as we all know. Orochimaru had no fucking arms, and it was kind of a 2-on-1. So he never was in a scenario where he was in immediate danger for his life. Even getting beaten down by Tsunade, he was never greatly concerned, at least from my perception. I think at his best, he'd be above Tsunade. They're all relative for sure, clearly. Just the very name, the 3 legendary Sannin, implies it. It implies that they're somewhat relative. But based off feats, based off the narrative being told, the most powerful Sannin, I would say Orochimaru would beat Jiraiya most likely. It'd be high difficulty, extremely high. But yeah, it would be a very close fight. Tsunade did lift Gamakichi's sword there too. That's true. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Orochimaru, right, was able to defeat Hiruzen, right? I mean, he did have help from the Edo Tenseis, but they were vastly weaker than their original selves when they were alive. Hiruzen was still stated to be the strongest out of the Kage at that point in time, and Orochimaru was just as deadly as ever, right? So that Orochimaru probably most likely beats Jiraiya, but that's contentious, of course. It's still contentious. It's an interesting conversation. There's a lot of induction you have to make. Right? We don't have enough to make great deductive arguments. A lot of it is inductive. It's not empirical. It's more rational. And due to how contentious it is, you really can make an argument for several sides depending on your perspective, right? Because it's not concrete, right? It's not something that you could objectively say. Some people could interpret what Tsunade did against Madara as the end-all be-all and say, well, she cracked a Susanoo from arguably the strongest shinobi on Earth until Tsutsuki and Six Paths characters showed up, right? Besides Hachirama. So the fact that she was able to crack that and she had the speed to crack it implies that if she were to hit Orochimaru and Jiraiya now, it would probably kill them. I mean, that's not a crazy argument. I don't believe that personally, but depending on your rhetoric and your rationale and your rational argument, you can make that case. You can make that case. Give Orochimaru Edo Tensei, it's kind of hard to manage. Yeah, Edo Tensei is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. Especially the war arc Edo Tensei. I mean, he GG's almost anybody with that, including Madara. I mean, if he has enough time to summon the Edo Tenseis, that is. Even Madara would have trouble with him. Because the Edo Tenseis were all Hokage. Near their peak, by the way. That was a heavily improved Edo Tensei. Interesting conversation, because there is arguments for each side. There really is. Even for Tsunade, who I personally think is probably the weakest out of the three Sannin. Not by much, but I think she's inferior to the other two. But yeah, the three Sannin, that's always going to be a contentious topic. It's an interesting one to debate. It's a good one to. It's a good topic to use to train your skills as far as power scaler and a debater. It's a good one to engage in because it is contentious. Like Jiraiya versus Orochimaru, debating that, it's difficult, right? I mean, taking away Edo Tensei, that is. Obviously, with Edo Tensei, he beats almost anybody. War Arc Edo Tensei, he defeats almost anyone. But it is contentious without that. So, definitely.